roll call real quick here, and then we'll get started. Jared, Katie, Emmy, Max. All right. Joe, Alyssa, Daniel, Caleb, Noah. Noah, you look like you're in the witness protection program. It must be dark in your room. Well, sorry we have to do all this via Zoom today. I think Monday, my hope is to be in class in person, so that would be great. Pardon my cough. So, all right. Well, good morning, everybody. Good to have you back. Let me, just so I can make sure everyone's audio is working and that we're all here, present, and accounted for. Why don't we just go around the room, start with Joe. Tell us, what are you doing this weekend, Joe?
I don't have that much, but hopefully going to a couple soccer games, including Faith's.
Yeah, true. The homecoming weekend, right? So.
Yeah.
All right, Max, what about you?
I'm traveling back to Illinois. I'm going to visit Emily and her family for the weekend.
Nice. Katie, what about you?
My sister's coming up from Illinois, so we're going to hang out this weekend, and then we're pulpit filling at a different church this weekend, so that'll be fun.
Oh, wow. Cool. So is your sister here for the student weekend, the whatever it is, student experience or whatever? There's like 40 students on campus
she's
today,
like
I guess.
Oh, wow. No, she's visiting like her boyfriend up in Creston, so I'm just kind of third wheeling with them.
Nice. All right, cool. Daniel, what are you doing this weekend?
We're just going up to Minnesota tonight to Kenzie's family's, and then Saturday her brother's getting married, so we're gonna travel over to Wisconsin for that.
Oh, wow. Where in Wisconsin?
I have no idea. No idea.
All right. He is getting married, though. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, we think so.
All right.
So that's the plan.
Yeah, the governor of Wisconsin just yesterday locked down events down to 10 people again or whatever, so it's kind of a pain. But
oh, really? Oh, well, then they're probably not following that rule.
Yeah. Noah, what about you? What are you doing this weekend?
I have a soccer game this weekend.
Yeah, all right. Emmy, you heading back this weekend? Heading back to campus?
Yeah, I'm leaving tomorrow morning, so I can make it back hopefully for like the tail end of a couple soccer games and then for the homecoming stuff.
Nice. Jared Ball, what are you doing?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. My computer says my mic is locked on mute. I don't know why. I plan to do a lot of homework and to actually hopefully knock out a couple projects. Take some of the things flying around in the air, nail them to the ground, but nothing big.
All right. Okay. All right. Alyssa, I know you're not on screen, but have you got your audio working?
Yeah. I'm just going to the soccer games this weekend and then probably trying to get caught up on some homework.
Yeah, good. All right. Caleb?
Well, I'm heading to Camp Dodge this evening. I have drill this weekend, so got our PT test and our rifle qual. Yep.
You have
my
your
weekend
PT.
plans.
What did you say after PT test?
Rifle qualification.
Rifle qualifications. Nice. Okay. Are you ready for that?
I think so. They're both new, so it's a new rifle qual and a new PT test. So just gonna send it.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, guys, good. Thanks for everyone jumping on there. It helps me to know everything's working. And
I did forget one thing.
yeah.
I'm going to beat P. Tilly in the cornhole contest. So.
Okay.
Together.
All right. I don't know. I mean, that's a pretty big claim because he's kind of one of those redneck game guys. So, you gotta. I'll be curious to hear how that goes. So you could. He's probably played a lot of cornhole though. So okay, well here's the plan for today. We have two sections that we need to cover. We need to talk about the Wall Street Journal article about COVID, and we also need to talk about how the mighty fall, denial of risk and peril. And you each submitted great write-ups on all these things. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you who's going to do what, and then we're going to take a short break so you can kind of everyone can get their, like, pull up their article that they wrote and kind of refresh your memory for a minute. And then we'll discuss it, and then we'll take another 2 or 3 minute break so you can pull up the next one. So the first one I want to do is the Wall Street Journal article, and I'm going to have Emmy just kind of lead the discussion just because her write-up was really good, and she found another higher ed article. So Emmy, all I want you to do is kind of just summarize it and then, facilitate getting us all talking about it, and then I'll take it from there. And so I'm going to give us all a break here in a second to do that, but I'll go ahead and give you a heads up of what's coming for the rest of it. When we talk about how the mighty fall, I think what I'm going to do is have Jared Ball kick off that discussion in a few minutes. Just tell him the main story of the chapter, because when he did his summary, he basically retold the story on video for me. So if you'll do the main story that kicks the chapter off, and then I'll lead the discussion, but I'm going to use Katie Brown's outline because she did a real good job kind of given a pretty thorough outline. So, and we'll all talk about that, but I want everyone to be able to get their mind around it. So we'll do this in stages. So first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you I'll give you like 4 minute break so you can kind of refresh your memory about the Wall Street Journal article, to prevent COVID-19 spread, colleges should beef up precautions, health officials warn. I'd like you to go back and look at what you wrote about that, and we'll all come back together at 7:11. Okay, so you can mute your camera and your audio for 4 minutes. All right, let's jump into this. Emmy, if you don't mind kind of walking us through the gist of the article and then what you found.
Okay. So basically through this article, I know we all read it just to kind of reread what I said. It's just discussing the different approaches just from 2 different schools' perspectives on like the COVID pandemic and everything like that. So the first one was the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And this college is the one that decided to shut down and send all the students home before the semester like really even started. So they had, in the article that I found, it kind of took this broad perspective of like an outside view of just looking into the college and brought it really down to a specific student's testimonial about just the approach that the college took itself on the outbreak and everything like that. So the article I found was from Inside Higher Education, and it was titled The Blame Game. And the author just really focused on one student's perspective. Her name is Kira Griffith. She stated in an interview that she was disappointed in how the school called off classes due to COVID outbreak among the students, because the students were like knowingly violating the Carolina Together guidelines. So they knew that they were breaking the rules, but they didn't really care. So she was like, on one hand, really disappointed in the students and how they approached the situation and how they were just kind of reckless and everything. But she also turned it 180 degrees, and she was equally disappointed with the university's leaders, which, quote, put the students in the situation. And when I read that, it kind of like put me off a little bit. I was like, well, I wonder if I didn't know if she was like pushing all of the blame back onto the leadership in order to get the blame off of their shoulders. But things that she had brought up kind of made it a little more clear to me why she thought that was the reason that they put the students in the situation. She stated that it left a lot of room for mistakes, so their guidelines weren't super clear. Like they obviously had, wear masks, socially distance, don't be in large groups, everything like that, but they didn't really have any specific guidelines. And she also said, let's see here, sorry, I'm trying to like bring everything together. An adolescent and behavioral expert review, I guess, said that the age range of students that are 18 to 22, are least likely to follow directions preventing the spread of COVID. It was bringing it to like the point that in colleges, when new students come or returning students come, they want to get to know new people. So then they throw parties and everything, and that encourages sharing beverages and everything like that. So it really, like, there is obviously control in the general sense, but once parties and stuff happen, there's only so much they can do and everything like that, because they could say don't throw any parties, but you know, they're least likely to really listen to it because kids in our age range, we're not really as affected by COVID, like physically. If we do contract it, then other people are, because it doesn't really affect us as hard. And then the student goes on to say, let's see here. That with all the guidelines that they were put, like once they decided to have school, they decided to put like all of their dorms at full capacity and everything like that. And so that really didn't encourage social distancing anyway, since they put all of the students in close quarters and everything like that. Then flipping back to our article that we did read, in Brown University School of Public Health, like their university, they decided just to take a really controlled approach on it. They obviously enforced masks and social distancing and everything like that, but they also decided to have like testing twice a day and everything like that. So I guess just looking at these two articles, where do you, I just wanted to see like the kind of honing in on each of the schools, what things are they doing right, or what things did they do wrong, like just kind of opening it up to discussion. So like for University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, what are things that they could have done to prevent the students from going home? So I'll just kind of open it up. So like, what are things that, I guess, if you were in charge of the school, what would you have done differently, or what things would you have specified or kind of honed in on in order to make the students kind of realize expectations?
Yeah, good question. And this is based on the assumption that, you know, someone pays $51,000 a year to go to University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. If you're out of state, if you're not an in-state resident, they want to be there. Like, they want to get their money's worth. So, looking at their response, let's start with exactly what Emily said. So, as you look at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, they started school and then they sent everyone home. They're doing the whole semester remotely. What would you do if you were in leadership there, maybe that could have prevented that from happening? Because that could not have been the original plan. Anyone can jump in.
I would say maybe communicate the seriousness of your regulations by enforcing some punishment for not following them. One of the articles I found talked about Tulane University. I'm not familiar with it, but they said they would threaten suspension or even expulsion from the university if students engaged in parties of more than 15 people. So just demonstrating the seriousness of, hey, if you guys do this, you guys are out of here, then that should hopefully keep people from breaking those rules that you have.
Yeah. Makes you wonder. I mean, like Tulane, I believe, is a large Catholic engineering university in Louisiana, I think, if I'm not mistaken. But you know, if some schools are known for being like party schools, so they have a hard time. They don't really have things in place for punishing, for example, or for restricting. It's part of their campus culture, especially if they have like a open campus where they have residents and stuff that don't actually live on the campus, but it's close to the campus. So what else? Anyone else? What would you, as an armchair quarterback, do if you were looking at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill? What do you think could have been done to keep from literally bringing tens of thousands of people back to campus and then turning around and sending them all right back home and looking like you didn't know what you were doing?
I don't really know what I would have done to prevent it, but afterwards I wouldn't have sent everybody home because seeing that people of our age range are better fit to handle COVID, and it doesn't really affect us as much. Sending everybody back to their communities and their families is probably a terrible idea, because then they have like their grandparents and whoever else could live with them, and then they're affected by it. So I think it would have been smarter to just crack down after the outbreaks and then quarantine people and just keep them at campus.
Yeah. So instead of the pendulum swinging all the way back the other way and sending everyone home, now that they've got it, might as well just keep them there. Sounds a little bit like how Faith handled it, really. I mean, people came back, and then we had basically our own version of a bunch of people either getting exposed or actually getting it. But by keeping everyone together, we all kind of healed through it. And so now you have a pretty healthy campus. It just was a hassle for a couple weeks. So anyone else?
I would also add to Joe's comment. A lot of the people, at least that I've talked to in our age group, like, they don't really care that much if they get it. They just rather get it and get over with it. So, if they get it at school, fine, then just quarantine. But then afterwards, you're fine for like the next 3 months, because it doesn't hit us that hard for the most part. It's just like a bad cold, but then you get it and you're done with it, and then you have immunity for a while.
Yeah. Well, I know, I don't know how you guys have viewed COVID itself, but I looked at it from the very beginning as an inevitability, right? Like, okay, everyone's going to get it. And in the back of my mind, I've been thinking, well, maybe I even already had it because I was really sick last January for a couple days. And I'm like, oh, maybe that was the COVID, and it was kind of a mystery flu. But now I'm in that small percentage of people that did get hit hard by it. So like my response to COVID was totally different than what I would have expected. Everyone's optimistic, right? So you always assume you're going to get a light case. It's just going to be a head cold, and you're going to be able to bounce back. For me, it's been kind of the opposite. So I'm on day 16 right now. And so I have been pretty negatively impacted by it. Now I'm grateful that I get to teach at Faith, and they've been really flexible with me and stuff. But so, good comments all around, and good synopsis in me. The Wall Street Journal article just happened to come out about the time I was like super sick. So I was like, hey, this is a good current issue, because it does affect organizations, especially colleges right now. And Iowa is kind of in the news for having a high number of people testing positive. But the Wall Street Journal article had the two main points that I think most of you touched on, which is, number one, young people are the least likely to get really sick from this, right? So if you're under the age of 25 or whatever, your chances of actually getting sick are really, really slim. You're going to get minor symptoms. A lot of young people don't even know they have it, or it just goes by really fast. And then number two, so not only are you the least likely to get really sick, you're also the least likely to follow any rules that would keep you from getting exposed to COVID, because you don't feel a threat. So you're not really that worried about it. And so those two things in combination make it very unique for colleges. And so let me wrap this part of the conversation up with one last thing, get a few people to give feedback. So how has COVID over the last couple of weeks impacted, what ways have you seen COVID impact Faith and then the community surrounding Faith? So because Faith happens on campus, Monday through Friday from 7 to 4, but then Faith also is in a lot of other places in the community. So how has COVID impacted Faith off of this discussion? Let's get a few of you guys to jump in on that.
Like, one obvious way is like at churches. Like, I know our church we were start kids Wednesday night stuff. Like the week we had to start quarantining, since so many college kids couldn't start as soon as they wanted to.
Yeah. So some of the churches are really dependent on college volunteerism to kind of be able to do some of their extra ministries and things. And then when we all get locked down, they have to stop everything, which as a former pastor, sometimes that, you have mixed emotions about that, because you want to be able to operate like a normal church where you're not dependent on any one group. But on the other hand, it's really nice to have those students. And so it's too bad when a church has to stop what it's doing because of what happens on a campus. What else? Let me get maybe one or two others. How has our community been impacted by COVID at Faith?
Well, some of the more outreach types that we've tried to do, I know our class in particular, we really enjoy our cooperation with Bluebeam. And one thing that this major has done in the past, and one thing that you've done, Professor, is we have reached out to local businesses and tried to visit those businesses, interact with them, and get to know better what the business world is like. And because of COVID, those opportunities have, largely gone away. With Bluebeam, however, we have pivoted, of course, to the online discussion, but just those opportunities to go out and interact and just kind of reach across to the business community in our area that's diminished a whole lot.
Yeah, I agree. All the networking opportunities and interaction. By this time in the semester, I had hoped that we would have already done 2 field trips out to businesses and had a lot more guest speakers and things like that. So, and then the Biz Lab thing itself, the ideal opportunity for doing that Biz Lab would have been doing it at Bluebeam Wednesday morning, right? Because it's just more fun to get out and do something in a different location, and it changes your perspective. And then having to do it on Zoom, it's not that it's unsatisfactory, but it's not as good. And so, yeah. Well, I think the point of this is, as I wrap this up, is so the Wall Street Journal article was just a great lens to look through on how COVID's affecting college organizations, and this is current issues in organizational leadership. And when you put yourself in the shoes of decision makers and leaders, you have to start thinking about, okay, so if I'm ever in that seat where I have to make a decision, or I'm one of the people giving advice to help people make decisions, what advice would I give? And trying to help us all think a little more critically, because even within this class, we might have different opinions on, how strict or how loose to go with some of the regulations and stuff. But there are real world implications for every decision we make. And there's no perfect solution. There's no way to keep everyone totally from getting COVID. Even if you left everyone at home, what you'd have is you'd have no one getting COVID on campus. You'd have people getting COVID at home, and you'd have less college students, which affects the prime directive of the college. So anyway, good job on that, and good insights, everyone. So this is what we're going to do now. I'm going to give you about a 5-minute opportunity to refresh your mind, because you might have read that chapter on how the mighty fall. You might have read that a week ago or more. So I'd like you to just review your summary of that, and then I'm going to have Jared Ball kick us off with the opening story, just to kind of get us all thinking about that. And then I'm going to walk through the outline, but I'm going to just use the visual part of Katie's outline, because it'll be a good way for us to kind of all follow together. So you can mute your camera and your mic for 5 minutes. We'll come back at 7:35. Great. All right, Jared Ball, why don't you start us off with the story that kind of kicked the whole chapter off, because I think it's probably the best illustration. When I first got a hold of this book, I listened to the audiobook version, and so just listening to the story was really good. So Jared, give us a rundown on the story.
I'll try to live up to the audiobook. So chapter 3 was denial of risk and peril, and we were given the example of 2 companies. And it was a comparison and contrast, because these 2 companies went about a similar situation very differently. So the first one was Motorola. They had a program called Iridium that was visualized in the late 80s. And The story was about a man who, was not able to communicate with his wife when they went on vacation because there was spotty service. He wasn't able to talk with people back home. And so he came up with the idea of satellite phones, essentially. There would be 33, I believe it was, satellites launched into orbit, low orbit, and phones made up that would be able to interact with those satellites instead of cell towers. So this project took a little while to be realized, but the company Motorola took it up and invested $537 million by 1996. So they threw in a large investment right out the gate. The problem with this was by 1996, cell phones had gotten a whole lot better. They had gotten smaller, they had gotten cheaper, and the service had gotten a lot better. But they were already too far in to really be able to either stop the project or pivot into something else. Now, a couple more drawbacks for the Iridium program was the handsets were $3,000 and they were about the size of a brick. So the technology that Iridium was based on was already becoming a little bit archaic. The calls were also $3 to $7 per minute. So you can imagine somebody, if these were to be rolled out onto the market, the comparison between cell phones and Iridium phones would be extremely drastic. Another drawback was they only worked outside. You couldn't have any canopy covering over top of you. You couldn't call indoors because they had to connect to the satellites. So in 1999, the Iridium program, which was a separate program at this time, Motorola had set it aside, made it its own thing, filed for bankruptcy, defaulting on $1.5 billion in loans. So the chapter mentioned that this really accelerated Motorola towards stage 4 of decline. Now, the positive example of a company doing something similar to this is Texas Instruments. And they created this technology called DSP. And I'm not quite sure what that stands for, but I know that they rolled it out first in a product called Speak and Spell, which was a program for children to help them learn how to speak and spell, or to help them learn how to spell. And the DSP technology would actually take language and crunch it down into bits and bytes so that it could be stored inside of computers and speak back to whoever was using it. And so what Texas Instruments did was they invested a small $150,000 in 1979 into this technology, and it garnered $6 million in revenue, and that was within a few years, and that was enough to get the heads of TI to think, oh, this is good tech, we're going to explore this further. Now you can already see the difference between Motorola and Texas Instruments, where Motorola threw $537 million at the program off the bat. Texas Instruments started off with a very small amount of money and decided later on to roll more into it. And it was only $6 million. It was only $6 million that was brought in that caused them to do that. And so they landed a deal with Nokia in 1993 to use DSP chips in their cell phones. And in 1997, DSP was in 2 million phones. And so Texas Instruments watched the DSP tech grow from a very small, basically test audience or test product line to $2 million phones. And that's when Texas Instruments thought, okay, we're going to become what they call the Intel of DSP tech. And so that's when they decided to dominate the markets. And that's when they chose, because of proven record, to move on and start rolling more money into this program. And so these two examples are of one company who denied risk and peril, and that was Motorola, and they moved, of course, quickly on to stage 4, and their Iridium program died. And then Texas Instruments, which understood the risk and peril in the situation, and they chose to confront it in a very smart way, which allowed them to roll out the DSP program into more phones, and then and avoid that hubris of success and then the denial of risk and peril.
Great summary. Thank you. Yeah, you can see that if you were to take the two companies, put them side by side, they probably had equal opportunity as far as, multi-billion-dollar publicly traded companies. They had the same number of geniuses working at both companies, engineers and people that understand these things. They had all the different pieces in place, yet one went down a path that literally wasted billions of dollars. And it's not just, some of you might be familiar with the term opportunity cost, not just the money they lost, but the money they could have made. So that's sometimes a much greater long-term pain. It's not just what they lost. They lost $1.5 billion in their whole satellite thing, and they, all that stuff is just space junk now. But what they could have made if they could have stepped back and asked the questions that we're gonna kind of go through here pretty quickly, but they had all this opportunity cost lost. Where could they be right now if they would have just done it a little different? So with that, I'm gonna pull up the slideshow here, and Max, can you see that slide, stage 3, denial of risk and peril? I can't see your guys' faces. Okay, great. So I don't have a view of you guys, so I'm just going to walk through this, and just as a good overview. And again, because I let you guys kind of present your summaries in different ways. Some of you write up a nice report, which is totally fine, and it shows a thorough grasp of the knowledge. Some of you are more graphic oriented, and you like to create the slideshows for me. This is great. This is very helpful. A couple of you do video recordings, which is also great. So as long as you're putting in that level of effort, you're getting rewarded with a good number of points. So let me just walk through this real quick here. So stage 3 is not black and white. It's easy for us as people in a classroom to look at these huge companies, multi-layered, all around the world, billion-dollar companies, and say, oh, I know what I would have done different. It's kind of like us talking about COVID. Things are not always real clear. So the greatest danger comes from misinterpreting ambiguous data in situations when one faces severe or catastrophic consequences if the ambiguity resolves itself in a way that's not in favor of the company. And so in the Fundamentals of Business Management class, I talked about risk management a little bit, and a few of you are in that class. And I talk about the idea in risk management of above the waterline and below the waterline decisions. And when it comes to thinking about risk, if you make a decision, and let's say that you're on a ship and you make a decision, and this decision is going to lead to something blowing up, and that explosion is going to blow a hole in the side of the boat. If you make a decision that's a below the waterline decision, excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. Below the waterline decision, when that thing blows up, your boat is going to take on a bunch of water and you could sink the ship. If you make a decision that's an above the waterline decision, even if it blows up, you can still keep sailing, you can patch it as you go. And so risk management's a big part of these decisions, and asking questions. That's the big part of this whole point, is were the companies asking questions? So 3 questions. What's the upside even if events turn out well? So, what's the potential gain? And I think this is actually the part of the chapter where they talk about the above the waterline decisions. What's the downside if events go very badly? And can you live with the downside? So some of you, I don't know how many of you are like this, but some of you, if you're running late for work, you tell yourself, well, if I hit all green lights between here and work, I'll still make it on time. And so you leave at the very last possible second, assuming you're going to always hit all green lights. And every once in a while, you get lucky enough and you do. And so the upside of leaving at the last possible second is, hey, you get a few more minutes at home to relax. The downside, if you don't hit all green lights, is you're going to be late for work. And after being late for work a couple times, you're going to get written up and you're going to get in trouble. And so can you live with getting in trouble at work? And that's a small decision. So multiple at times, $1 million decisions. Sometimes the upside might be great. The return might be great, but the downside, might be so great that you might not be able to live with the consequences of that. As companies move deeper into stage 3, they begin to accumulate warning signs. And it's amazing that companies with boards and teams of engineers and executive leaders all have all these different tools at their disposal, and yet they still ignore some of these warning signs. These three areas, if you're a little more business minded, you might trigger on these a little more. But basically, are your margins, your gross margins, are they still healthy? Number 2, your current ratio. That's your current ratio and your debt to equity ratio are 2 different formulas that companies use to determine how much money do they have in the bank, how much money do they have in debt, and things like that. So I won't get into that, but these are standard accounting practices that every company has access to. Especially the bigger the company, the more of these numbers they have. So you would think they would actually have more warning signs, not less. So markers for stage 3 here. What to look for and avoid? Well, amplification of positive results and discounts of negative results. So companies that only listen to the good news and they're assuming that everything's positive and they don't take a realistic view of the negative results, they're the ones that are going to face some hard times in this stage. Big bets and bold goals without empirical validation. This happens a lot of times when a new leader comes into an organization, and with a sincere desire to try to get all the people that are working there excited, they kind of make some big bets and some bold goals, but they don't necessarily have a way to back it up. Incurring huge downside risk based on ambiguous data. So, sometimes because it's a company, it's not your own money. You might be a little more willing to gamble. And the downside risk, when you call it downside risk, it means what is going to go bad if this doesn't turn out exactly the way we're hoping. And so companies sometimes are willing to gamble on ambiguous data. Erosion of healthy team dynamics. This is where, when you're talking about a team, you got people there that should be able to express their opinion. If they have concerns, if they have a question, they should be able to ask it. And that stuff starts to break down sometimes at this stage. Externalizing blame, blaming the economy, blaming the market, blaming the competitors, blaming, one department, instead of internalizing and saying, okay, where could we go wrong here? Obsessive reorganizations. Some companies, in an effort to always, they're always tinkering with the internal aspects of the company, and they kind of lose sight of what that could do as far as causing constant disruption. And then imperious detachment, just basically, kind of being above it all and being aloof. So I'm gonna stop sharing now. Okay, so teams on the way down. Shield people in power from the grim facts, and they don't shine the light on the harsh realities, right? Versus teams on the way up, people bring forth unpleasant facts, and they're willing to, it's just a good quote, they're basically willing to say, hey, this is really going to be ugly, but we need to see this if we're going to do right by this company. Versus and you can kind of see this if you ever, watching the old war movies, the Nazi Empire. Hitler was surrounded by people that just told him that every one of his ideas was brilliant. and that he could never fail, and that the empire was going to reign for another 1,000 years. And ultimately, I'm not saying Hitler needed better advisors. I'm just it's just part of human nature. Sometimes people in high levels of leadership, they don't want to hear bad news. They just want to hear you tell them how good the news is, and then they want you to fix the bad news before it comes to their ears. And that's not healthy, and that's what leads to exactly what we're talking about. So, okay, well, we might touch on this just a little more on Monday. We'll also dive into design thinking on Monday a little bit to kind of get us ready for next Wednesday. So that's about it for today. You guys got any questions? I think there might have been one RR assignment that doesn't have a topic assigned to it. If there's no topic, you don't have to do it yet. I think I'm going to get that one out today. So I moved the due date back on that like a whole week. So if you ever have a question, if there's ever like a blank assignment or something, like it's on the due date, but there's no details, that just means that I haven't populated yet. You don't have to like worry about that. So you guys are all really doing well on your grades. There is no midterm exam next week, so we'll probably just reclaim a little bit of our class time that we've missed and instead and learn some good stuff. So, okay. All right. No questions. Okay, you guys have a great day. See you later.